Hello and welcome to WriterSpeak, a program dedicated to the written word and those who produce it. I am your host, Jeane Slone. I distribute local authors' books throughout the county, and I have written 2 historical fictions, She Flew Bombers and She Built Ships During World War II. Today in the studio, I would like to welcome Theresa Dintino.
Thank you, Jeannie. It's good to be here.
It's nice to have you. I would like to, as everybody can see, Theresa is quite a prolific writer. I have thoroughly enjoyed her this is her 3rd book, The Strega and the Dreamer. And I was interested in speaking about this book first since it was a book I couldn't put down. I am given many books to read, and I was quite surprised how I was able to just keep on reading this book instead of putting it down. So tell me, Theresa, did you know it was going to be 375 pages, which for today is quite a thick book?
Oh, well, no, I didn't know it was going to be 375 pages. That would have been quite psychic of me. But my other books had been probably about half that size. But this book was actually 800 pages when I first finished it. And I sent it to an agent who said she loved it, but books could not be any more than 400 pages these days. So that was a very traumatic letter, knowing that I had to cut 400 pages out of a book. And I didn't know whether or not, to believe her or if I should do it. But I said, well, what the heck, I'm going to try. And so I did. I went in and I took a lot of material out of the book. I think it's a better book for it. But this is definitely a condensed version of this story.
Well, that's amazing, 800 pages. Tell us how you came to write this book, because I know it's semi-biographical.
A lot of the stories in this book are stories I heard as I was growing up about my great-grandparents. And it was really fun to incorporate those stories into a novel. But it's sometimes harder to write a novel based on stories you've already heard, because it's hard to know what to leave in and what to leave out. But the reason why I wrote The Strega and the Dreamer, it was interesting. I had already written my first 2 novels, which are based in Minoan Crete. And those novels are about a snake priestess. And the reason why I wrote those novels was because I discovered the whole world of the goddess by encountering the wonderful work of archaeologist Maria Gimbutas. She's an archaeologist who noticed that many of the artifacts that were uncovered in archaeological digs that represent female figures, or what she calls the goddess, were not paid much attention to and were never cataloged and were never, given the same level of importance as male figures. So she went on to try to catalog all these figurines she was seeing being carried out of these sites. So when I found Maria's work, I was just enthralled by this world that she had uncovered and very articulately detailed in her books about these Neolithic cultures of the goddess.
Well, so your first book, Stories They Told Me, is this Ode to Manoa a sequel of Stories They Told Me?
It goes the other way. Ode to Manoa came first, and that's the story of a priestess, a snake priestess in Bronze Age Crete, which was one of the last holdouts of goddess cultures on the planet. And this is the sequel to that book, Stories They Told Me.
See.
So I wrote those books because I wanted to imagine what it would possibly be like to grow up in a culture where the goddess is the main deity, and what it would be like to be a woman in a culture like that. So after I finished those 2 books, I kind of felt like, you know, there must be some kind of way that this has stayed on the planet, this consciousness of wise women and women who are priestesses, but maybe it looks different now. And I had always been told that my great-grandmother was a Strega, and I didn't really know what that meant. They told me she was a midwife and healer, and after I wrote those 2 books, I had this one aunt that particularly kept the memories of my great-grandmother, and she pulled me aside again, like she often did at family gatherings. I was raised Italian-American in a small town in New Hampshire, and she said, "Your great-grandmother was a Strega," again, and she started to read to me all these beautiful things she had written in this little notebook about her memories of her Nonna. And I just understood at that moment that I had a lineage in my own family, just like I had been searching for when I wrote those 2 books. So the way I understand things is by researching them and then writing. So I decided to write a book about my great-grandmother.
And Eva, your great-grandmother, is portrayed really as a goddess at first in Italy, right?
Well, do you mean a goddess worshiper?
Yes, that people worshipped her and that she was so knowledgeable.
Oh, that's interesting.
The contrast then of her being in Italy and how everybody thought she was just so wonderful and valuable to the village, and then coming to America and having almost the opposite occur.
It was heartbreaking to write about.
Yeah, that America thought midwives were witches, I guess. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's a pretty planetary phenomena that's what happened to women that, you know, in the Bronze Age were called priestesses. Then they became wise women and Strega. You know, they had folk names in their villages. And then they became witches and basically demonized and feared. And by the time, you know, it got to this country, there's not even a context for it here in most places. In Europe, you know, there was still the context because there was still the folk traditions and there were still these women in these villages that were carrying it on. But by the time the Italians were immigrating here, you know, even Catholicism looked pagan. So it was, yeah, it was pretty traumatic for a lot of the wise women that came from Europe.
Also, what I found fascinating about the Strega and the Dreamer is that it is not written, I guess you call it in a lineage fashion.
In a linear fashion?
Linear fashion. Can you explain how you did that?
So currently, the narrative moves from Italy to New Hampshire, where they move, and from the past to the present and back and forth like that. And what happened is that when it was 800 pages long, it was very much told from start to finish in a linear fashion. Mm-hmm. She was born, she grew up, she got married, and then she moved to America. But when I was advised to cut the novel down, I found the only way I could really do that was to, you know, shuffle the times and make the beginning into memories in the end. And so that's just kind of how it evolved when I went in to try to shorten the novel. It wasn't my intention. I actually didn't want to write a book like that because this book I wrote in the back and forth, kind of the more modern way of writing. And I had been reading a lot of books like that, and I longed for an old-fashioned novel to read myself. So I wanted to write an old-fashioned novel. But It seems that's not what people basically want to read right now. So
I was very impressed because I have read books that go back and forth in time, and I just find it too confusing. And it was very enjoyable and very well done. I think it's hard to do, to write that way.
It's hard to follow sometimes as a reader. It can be frustrating.
Yeah,
so I'm glad
it's hard to write and it's hard to follow, and when you can accomplish both, I think you're a really good writer that way.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad it worked. I like the way it came out.
The title of Stories They Told Me, where did that title come from?
That title arose from the story itself that the book talks about. The book talks a lot about how, because in the first novel, Ode to Manoa, Aurelia is the snake priestess, and so the way I imagined these snake priestesses in Crete was that they would get bit by the snake, and then they would go into trance, and they would receive information. And eventually they would get a story that they would present to the community as prophecy. And she presents a very difficult prophecy to her culture. She presents a prophecy about the end of the goddess-worshipping cultures. She sees that in her visions. In this novel, it's after she's delivered that prophecy, and she's noticing that the prophecy itself changed the culture on the island. And so this book talks a lot about how the stories we tell ourselves define what actually happens and what comes to be, and that we can change the stories.
You told me a little about the cover of Stories They Told Me. Explain that to me.
That was a really fun process. I had an idea in mind for the cover, and I noticed when I was in town one day that there was a card painted by a local artist that had the same wall painting from a cave that I wanted on the cover on a card she had painted. So I called her up and asked her if I could use it, and she said, well, she didn't know, but she would like to. We agreed that she would read the book and then paint a cover. We came to that agreement somehow. Her name's Suzanne de Verve, and she lives actually maybe in Occidental now. And so she read the book and painted that cover, and it's just very wonderful.
Oh, it is.
I love the way it came out.
Very, very beautiful. I wanted to know about your writing classes. Where are they held, and how long you have been teaching your writing classes?
I haven't been teaching for long. I just started actually in the summer, last summer. I decided, I don't remember what made me start offering classes, but the classes are really fun because I call them the, what do I call them? The art of spiritual, writing as spiritual practice. Yeah, that's it. And people come and I do a variety of exercises. Like sometimes I'll drum, or I'll lead them on a meditation so that everyone can get in a trance state, and then I give them 40 minutes to write from that trance state. And it's been really fun.
Do you get more females than males, or what has your proportion been of?
Yeah, so far I get more females than males.
But you do have some males?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh. That's a very innovative way to teach writing. I know that you promote it on your website and emails. It's a good way for us to all know about your writing, how that you're teaching writing. You also have a daily shamanic, I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, walks? Shamanic walks. Can you explain what that term means?
Shamanic?
Yes.
Or shamanic walks?
Yes, shamanic walks.
Well, let me back up to your previous question, because the reason why I started teaching these classes is because I noticed that that's how I write and have written all these years, is I get myself into a trance state. And the way I do it is by researching and reading, just getting into long-term reading and then waiting for the images to arise and writing what I see. And so, well, it's a complicated answer to the shamanic. The Strega, you know, the priestesses, they're not just midwives and healers. They're women that are in touch with the spiritual realm and are able to access the spiritual realm in order to do their healing. And when I was writing the Strega and the Dreamer, I had the opportunity to become a diviner in an African tradition. And it was very interesting to me that it arose at the same time I was writing this book about my great-grandmother. And through offering this divination work, which is shamanic, which means, I mean, the shamanic realm for me is anything that exists outside of what we would call 3D reality, anything in the spiritual realm, and worlds that are alive and here, even though, you know, we can't normally see them. So that's what I call the shamanic world. And I find one way to access that realm is to go on a walk every day in a very meditative and intentional way.
If people are interested in your stick, and how is that pronounced?
Stick divination?
Stick divination, they can contact you? And
they can, yes. They can find a place on my website to contact me, and there's even a phone number on my website, StregaandTheDreamer.com.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I wanted to know if your books are available in ebook form or just hardcover.
The Strega and the Dreamer is available in both. It's ebook and hardcover. This one's also, The Stories They Told Me also is available in both. And I'm currently creating an ebook for Ode to Manoa, so that will be released soon.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Now, in conclusion, I wanted to understand that you were able to go to Italy and really explore where your grandmother was a Strega. Is that correct?
I was. I've been there a couple times. I do want to say that the Strega and the Dreamer is not only about my great-grandmother, it's also about my great-grandfather and the men, the Italian men that came here. So it's very much a story of immigration, and that whole story that many of us have as our history in this country. And I went to Torre de Passeri a couple times. I don't speak the language, and it's a pretty heavy dialect there, so I can't say that I got a lot of, you know, real-time information from the people there, but I definitely got to explore the setting and get the feel for it, and I have relatives there still.
Well, you were very fortunate to be able to go there. I'm sure it enhanced your writing.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Thank you very much for joining us on WriterSpeak, Theresa Dintino. And I wanted to say that we are sponsored by the Sonoma County Gazette. Thank you all for joining us on WriterSpeak.
Thank you, Jeannie.